Ever wonder what a dedicated community of bird lovers talk about online? Well, get ready to fly with us as we take a deep dive into the fascinating world of ornithology.
Yeah, it's a subreddit where you can find pretty much anything and everything related to birds.
From those "How do I help this baby bird?" posts that pop up constantly to some seriously in-depth discussions about the weird and wonderful world of bird names.
It's a really unique blend of practical advice, people asking for help with real life bird situations, and then genuine curiosity about bird behavior and biology.
And sometimes even some, shall we say, lively debates.
Oh, absolutely. It's all driven by this shared love for our feathered friends, though.
And it's that surprising variety that makes this deep dive so interesting. We're going way beyond just looking at pretty bird pictures, although, let's be honest, there are plenty of those too.
Oh, yeah, tons.
But we're going deeper, uncovering the questions, the observations, those little aha moments that make this subreddit so fascinating.
Like one of the most common things you'll see on Ornithology is that classic, "Help, I found a baby bird" post.
Oh, yeah, those are everywhere.
Right. And you can just feel the panic in those posts. It's clear that people really, really want to do what's best for the bird.
Totally. You want to scoop them up, keep them safe, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. But there's often this underlying assumption that any baby bird outside the nest needs rescuing. And that's where the subreddit's pinned announcement about what to do if you find a baby bird is so important. Because it actually emphasizes that in many, many cases, the best thing you can do is dot nothing.
Which I'm sure isn't what most people want to hear when they're worried sick about a tiny bird. But there's a good reason for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. You see, often the parents are actually nearby, just watching and caring for their young from a distance. They haven't abandoned the baby bird, they're just giving it space.
So swooping in to save the day could actually do more harm than good.
Exactly. And it just highlights this core value of the ornithology community, this real emphasis on responsible bird care that goes way beyond just rescuing. It's about understanding bird behavior and respecting their natural instincts.
And you see that reflected in the sheer range of questions people ask, too. It's wild. Like one person wanted to know, can birds breathe through their nares with their beaks open? I mean, how specific can you get?
Right, but that's what I love about it. You can tell that people are really paying attention to these creatures,
Wow.
Like they're asking questions that most of us wouldn't even think to ask.
Totally. And it's not all just hypothetical situations and pondering bird anatomy either. You've got people on there grappling with real-life bird dilemmas.
Oh, for sure, like what to do about a bird's nest that's in a less than ideal location.
Right. Someone was worried about a dove's nest that looked like it was about to fall. Or how about that user who was totally puzzled because they had these unusually polite blue jays visiting their feeder?
I remember that one. That one was interesting because it really gets into this idea that, yeah, birds have individual personalities, just like we do. We tend to categorize certain types of birds as aggressive or timid, but in reality, it's much more nuanced than that.
It's so easy to forget that, right?
Mhm.
We make these assumptions about how all birds of a certain species will act, but they're individuals with their own quirks.
Totally. And, that whole thing about the blue jays kind of ties into another really cool thing about ornithology, which is how much it gets into actual bird behavior, like what they're doing and why they might be doing it. Remember that post about the robins that were using the same nest year after
Yeah.
year?
Oh, yeah. That was a good one. I think it even turned into a whole discussion about how those, seemingly normal bird behaviors can actually impact us as humans in some pretty funny ways.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even with all our technology and stuff, we're still really connected to the natural world, whether we realize it or not.
Like whether you've got a clean porch or one that's covered in, presents from a robin, all depends on their nesting habits.
Exactly. It's all connected. Speaking of things that make you take a closer look, what about that whole debate about the name purple finch? That one was a trip.
Oh, man, don't even get me started on that.
I know, right? A classic case of a bird's name just not quite matching up with reality.
Not even close.
It really highlights how tricky it can be to rely solely on those common names for birds versus using, their more formal scientific names.
Okay, but for those of us who don't speak fluent bird Latin, can you explain what the big deal is with common names?
Well, yeah, so common names are definitely easier to remember and say, but they can be kind of misleading, like the purple finch. It's not actually purple, more like a raspberry color, I guess.
Yeah, raspberry, maybe even a little reddish. Definitely not what I picture when I hear purple.
Right. So if you're new to birding and you're trying to identify one based on the name alone, you might be searching for a while.
And probably getting very confused in the process.
Exactly. And it's not just about the color either. Sometimes those common names for birds can be different depending on where you are in the world, which makes things even more confusing.
Right.
That's why a lot of ornithologists prefer using those scientific names, because they're standardized and, everyone uses the same ones, even if they are a mouthful to say sometimes.
True. But I have to say, seeing people get so fired up about these naming conventions, it shows just how much passion there is in the ornithology community. Like,
Yeah.
people really care about getting it right.
Absolutely. That subreddit, it's just bursting with curiosity and this real desire to learn and understand these creatures.
Yeah.
Whether it's a super specific question about a bird's anatomy, like someone actually asked if birds can see the laser on a camera, or just a simple plea for help identifying a feather they found, there's this shared sense of wonder that's really contagious.
I love that. Oh, and you can't forget about that incredible Lego project, the Shorebird collection. That was
I
amazing.
know. So cool.
It just goes to show that there are so many different ways to appreciate and celebrate birds. It doesn't have to be all serious bird watching and scientific observation all the time, although that's cool too. You can go from geeking out about like the tiniest details of a feather one minute to then seeing a Lego version of a puffin the next. It's amazing.
I know, right? And the best part is, it doesn't matter if you're like a serious birder who can identify every warbler by its song, or if you're just starting to, notice the birds in your own backyard. There's a place for everyone.
Totally. And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive into ornithology so cool. It's a great reminder that you don't need to be like a certified ornithologist with all the fancy gear to appreciate just how amazing birds are.
Definitely not.
So to wrap things up for our listeners, what I'm taking away from all this is whether you're listening to a cool bird song or trying to figure out how to keep those robins from decorating your porch, it's these shared experiences that connect us to the natural world. And ornithology is kind of like a window into that world.
Yeah, it is. And it reminds us that we can all learn from each other, too. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the stuff people post on there, like their observations and the questions they ask, it just makes you appreciate birds on a whole other level.
For sure. And who knows, maybe this deep dive has inspired you to, like, dust off those old binoculars or finally learn what all those birds hanging out of your feeder are called.
Or even build a Lego bird.
Right. Or that. The possibilities are endless. So until next time, happy birding, everyone.